So, welcome to Shmu in Focus. My name is Sarah and I will be your host for the next wee while. And today we are talking about women's mental health and suicide prevention week. So, I'll be your host for this episode. We are going to be speaking about suicide, mental health, and kind of people's struggles. So, if you are listening and you are struggling, please reach out and you can contact the Samaritans on 116123. I'm delighted today to be joined by Justine Dunbar from SAMH and Jill from Latnem. So for those of you that are listening that aren't aware of the charities or are aware, I'll just ask Justine to introduce herself a little bit.
Thanks, Sarah. So I work within the North East Suicide Prevention Team, so I'm the Community Engagement Officer for Aberdeen City, and I suppose that's a fancy way of saying our jobs involve being out and about in the community, reaching out to as many people, community groups, workplaces as we can, really to break the stigma around talking about suicide.
Perfect. And Jill, would you like to tell us about Latnem?
Yeah, I'm Jill and I'm one of the founders of Latnem. We've been going just over 4 years now, and we're a mental health peer support service for mums and birthing people. We're based in the northeast of Scotland, but we have a virtual service that covers the whole of Scotland, and in-person meetings in Elgin, Forres, Inveraray and Aberdeen. And we're peer support, so we've all been there. We're mums with mental health and we're there to help each other through.
Perfect. So thank you both for joining us. And we are here today because we are all passionate about suicide prevention. We're passionate about raising that awareness that mental health, everybody has mental health, and some people struggle with their mental health. And yeah, we want to raise awareness that that's okay. It's okay to speak about your mental health. It's okay to struggle. What's not okay is for you to struggle alone. And there's an array of services out there that can help and support you. So today we're just going to spend some time just chatting about kind of, I think we're going to do some myth busting, chat about some of the support networks that are out there. And hopefully we can all collectively raise awareness and live in a world where less people die by suicide. So I'm just going to hand over to Justine, who's going to speak a little bit about Suicide Prevention Day and why we're kind of hearing what the aim is.
So 10th September is World Suicide Prevention Day, so the theme for that is changing the narrative, starting the conversation. So this is bringing home this idea that even one conversation, no matter how small, a chance conversation in a community centre in your local shop, could make actually all the difference in terms of saving someone's life and actually creating a positive environment where people feel valued and able to speak about how they're feeling. I think it's important as well that we remember, so around 1 in 20 people could be thinking about suicide at any one time in Scotland, and I know that is probably quite a shocking statistic for people to get their heads around and to actually think about. But what it actually shows us is that sadly having thoughts of suicide can be a normal part of being a human being, and this feeds into this idea. This is why we've all got to be comfortable with asking about it and also creating an environment where people can speak about how they're feeling. And also remembering that sadly for every death by suicide around 135 people are affected, so we need to think about the ripple effect in our communities, and that extends widely, not just to immediate friends and family, but to people in your street, your community and in your workplace as well. And I think it's often assumed in terms of suicide prevention that women tend to have more established social connections, one, and that two, they feel more comfortable talking about their feelings. But I think that's just a stereotype, isn't it? And I think we can't lump us all in together and say that we're all the same. And I think it's some ways can be make things difficult, because if you're then a female who is struggling with isolation, perhaps doesn't find it very easy to talk, then does that make it doubly hard for you to actually open up, because it's almost as if you're going against that stereotype. So I think it's important when we look at suicide prevention that we don't forget the role of women. I know quite rightly there's been a lot of focus because we know that globally 3/4 of death by suicide are men. There's a focus on that, but we need to look at the role of women as well in terms of being at more risk from attempts by suicide as well. And I know that women can play a great role in people's lives in terms of supporters, but also recognising that we have our own challenges as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really important point to make, is that it's kind of a double-edged sword, is where we spend there's a lot of focus on male mental health and raising awareness, and as we say, we absolutely have to do that, but then sometimes I think we do forget about the females, that there is, yes, a lot of females do feel confident enough to speak about their feelings and do feel confident to go to the doctors, but there's a lot of them that don't, and I think we should just be recognising that everybody struggles, and let's encourage everybody to speak out and everybody to go to their doctors, and to get the support that you need to feel kind of better and to kind of get that support. So I think today we'll maybe chat about kind of some of the reasons why we think that is. So Jill, I'm going to come to you. Do you think there's any particular challenges that are facing females when we are speaking about suicide?
I think, just to touch on what Justine said, the perception that women have these established social networks and are better at talking about their feelings, that stereotype, I think nowadays with things like social media and this perception that your life looks perfect from the outside, you don't want to shatter anybody's opinion of you by letting them know what's really going on. If the opinion they've got of you is good, you might be clinging on to that. That might be your identity, that people think you've got it together, you're doing well, and especially...
It could be your coping mechanism.
Could be, yeah. It could be that's your armour. That's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
And especially, the charity that I run focuses on mums' mental health. So especially with new mums and birthing people, when there is this perception that it should be the happiest time in your life, and when it's not, admitting that to people is incredibly hard. So shattering people's opinion of you and actually turning around and saying, hey, I'm not actually coping. And also, I think, the suicide awareness work that's been done around young men is fabulous, but it sometimes does put women into the position of protector, carer, unofficial counsellor, unpaid counsellor, and forgets that they are individuals who might also have their own struggles. So it's a double-edged sword, really, because we do need to draw that attention to the people who are suffering the worst at the moment, but not forget about everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. Justine, have you got anything that you would like to...
I think I would probably just add a bit of personal experience into that, and going into what Jill was saying about this assumption about women's role as protectors or caregivers. And I think, if, and I include myself in this, like women of a certain age maybe that don't have kids, maybe chosen that's not what they want for their life, but I think there's a certain societal expectation, so you almost end up questioning what is my purpose, because you see, I suppose, your established friendship networks having their lives following a certain path, and that's absolutely fine. People's lives follow different paths, but then it's like, if I haven't chosen what society has expected for me, where is my role and where is my purpose? And I can see that again feeds into sort of breaking down all those stereotypes as well.
I think it's really difficult. If you are a female and you don't want to have children, and quite often you get, why are you not married? Why have you not got children? And that can be really damaging. And it's like, let's just stop asking people why do we need to challenge that, and talking about that role in society. I think for me it's there's the stigma against male mental health, that we don't speak up and things, but as you're saying, we've got that stigma, we're putting stigma against females as well, that actually no, it's okay and you guys do speak about your feelings and stuff. For me, I certainly, growing up, hated speaking about my feelings. It's only probably over the last couple of years, and as a support worker and in a role where I spend my week supporting everybody else, actually everybody's like, but you're always so happy and things, and it's like, no, that comes with resilience, and doesn't mean we've got it all together. We all have our struggles, but it took me a long time to ask for help, so they say. And I'm still really Rich was laughing at me today because we're going to an event and we've got all these camera bags, and I'm like, I can carry more than that, come on, I can't. He's like carrying 2, and I'm like on with 5-6 bags and tripods and everything, and he was like, it's okay, we can come back to the car, and I'm like, no, we will do this. And I think it is that society that has built us up. We're our own worst enemies, I think.
Sometimes,
really.
yeah.
So yeah, we've been chatting about suicide prevention and the female perception and mental health and such. So we've been speaking about barriers. What can we do, Justine, to be able to break down those barriers and to give females the opportunity to speak and open up?
I think probably one tip I would give, I suppose, it's about role modelling, and I suppose we all then have a responsibility in terms of breaking down the stigma about sharing our own experiences, good or bad. We were talking about, fear of shattering those illusions that people might have of you, but I think if we really want to create an environment where those that are really struggling to the point that they're thinking of ending their own lives can talk about how they feel, then all of us need to role model actually saying when things aren't fine. So that idea that someone will say to you, "Hi, how are you doing?" but it's almost like they just say that as a greeting. But actually, if you're asking that question, you need to be prepared for the answer, and that answer might be one that the person's having a really tough time, but that's okay. And I think we all need to kind of stop and think. So that would be my tip, was more of us sharing stories.
I think we're bad, especially as British, and looking through the glass at our wee cameraman, as when somebody asks you how they are, I'll automatically say, "I'm fine." And Martin will say, "Are you really fine?" Or you'll ask Martin, he'll say, "No, actually, I'm not fine." But as British, we are, but I normally get an honest answer from Martin. And it actually makes me stop and think, no, I've had a bit of a rough day. Today's been a bit of a struggle, because I think as a society we've built up this sort of, and as much as a lot of us probably do want to listen, but it's just became, what's the word I'm looking for, like common, like you just say, "Oh, how are you?" "I'm fine," as opposed to, well, actually, how, I think we need to change the way we ask that question. Or, how are things at home? How are things with the work? How are you getting on? Jill, what do you think we can do?
I think it's much of the same modelling. I've lost count of the number of times we've had a mum say to me, "But you seem so normal," when I talk about my own experience of suicide attempts after having my first daughter. And it's not that they're being rude, it's a self-stigma that they hold inside, that you can't be normal and have had that experience. And so when we talk about it at Latnem, and when mums come into this safe space that they've been really, really brave to come into, because by coming into a Latnem meeting, you've put your hand up and said, "Hey, I'm a mum with mental health, whether I've got a diagnosis or not." And not everyone at Latnem has had suicidal thoughts or suicide attempts, but there are a good number of us. And so when we have that conversation, and I am quite normal, I'm the wifey you'd meet in Tesco, I used to work in oil and gas, I've got 2 kids and a puppy, and I'm quite normal, but there were times in my life where my mental health was so poor and I wasn't being cared for in the way that I should have been, and I was putting so much pressure and judgment and shame and stigma on myself that I thought, hey, my children would be better off if I wasn't here. They'd be better off with the idea of the mum I would have been, and people telling them I would be a great mum, than what they've got right now. And having that conversation to a new mum who is feeling like that, it's not going to give her the idea to go away and contemplate suicide, but it's going to give her the idea that, hey, Jill survived. How? Because I want to get out feeling this way. And in that safe space, so maybe it's more safe spaces, maybe it's more modelling, it's less stigma and less shame, and more people saying, hey, I've been there. Because that environment, our mums come in and they come in tense and stressed from the day, and there's a thing that happens when they sit down and they get handed their cup of tea, and they just and the shoulders come down, and they let it all out because it's safe to be whatever's going on for them there. And it's lovely to see, and it's so needed, and I think so many other people need that too. So if you're a mum or birthing person, come to Latnem. But there's so many other things.
It's great that Latnem is there, but as we've identified, Latnem's there for mums or birthing people. There is so many people that are out there that don't, and I mean, we see it on on social media, is there a group like Andy's Man Club, is there a group like Men in Mind for females, and there's very little. I know, Justine, you've been doing a bit of work and kind of trying to figure out if there is any kind of groups around for females. Is there?
It's interesting because I was at an information session that Andy's Man Club did, and somebody raised this, and I'm sure they said they don't have a local group, but there's something, I want to say networks of wellbeing for women. I think the nearest group at the moment is around Forfar way, so I think the issue they seem to have is getting facilitators in this area, but I suppose it's probably an area of work I think I would like to look at as well. So I mean, if anyone's out there and thinks they would like to get involved in facilitation or explore that further, is happy to have that discussion, because I think that is something that, like you said, Sarah, it comes up quite a lot at various different community things that I go to. We talk about support, and there's often either people themselves wanting the support or people that are supporting other women saying they're
signpost.
Increasingly getting or working with women who are saying they're quite socially isolated. So again, that goes back to busting that stereotype about how women are assumed to be well connected and able to talk, and obviously there's that increasing gap maybe of people that are struggling to meet people, and there's that need there. So,
and I mean, you'll see this, Jill, if you're a mum and you are at home with the kids or anything, that can be isolating as much as your children are your world. Children are hard work at the same time as well.
Yes.
And
I love mine dearly, but
yes, mine has now moved out, and I'm like, okay, come and visit now and then. But yeah, to have young children who are demanding and hormonal, or going through all the challenges that children do, to not have another adult to speak to, that can be. And if you're a single parent,
we've got a lot of single parents. We've got a lot of parents who are solo parenting because partner works away, whether that's military or offshore, particularly in this area. It is an incredibly isolating time if you don't have a village. And people online, and I'm going to say Instagram again, I'm probably getting into trouble for talking about them too much, but there's this image of these women with these great connected families where somebody drops off a casserole and grandma takes the wee one, and that isn't most people's reality.
That's not life. No.
So they're trying to parent as if they've got a village and be calm and connected and build this attachment and really concentrate on their children's mental health and well-being while still dealing with everything themselves. And my particular journey was through a traumatic birth that led to me having quite severe PTSD from nearly dying a couple of times, and that was how I arrived at having mental health problems. I probably had before but was not diagnosed, and that is not an uncommon story. Traumatic birth affects 1 in 20 women in the UK, and not getting treatment for it, not getting the proper support and care impacts your mental health so badly. And we do have a lot of mums who have that experience locally, so they're trying to parent, trying to care for everybody, look after everybody else's needs. Their needs go to the bottom of the list time and time again, and is it any wonder that their mental health suffers? And I think a lot of women, even who are not mums, are sort of pigeonholed into that caring role again. So again, it's like your needs are at the bottom of the list. You'll be fine. You've got resources and networks and things. But to a lot of people, it's just not something they talk about.
No, definitely not. And it's hard going being a female. And if you are in a relationship or that, often the two of you are having to work now because cost of living and going through a pandemic and everything is just, the cost of everything is going up, and that's a lot of mental load on you, to have to do the cooking and the cleaning and the shopping and the kids' activities that take up every night, and running about and looking after everyone else. And that is, again, that adopts to the females predominantly, and again goes back to the stigma that society has created. But actually, that stigma that society created, the female never worked 40 hours a week. The female was at home and was able to do all that. But now females are trying to match this as well. It's just, it can be hard going, the pressures of work and things as well.
And I think at the other end of the spectrum as well, what we sometimes find, and obviously there are a lot of men out there doing a great caring job, but I think what I've seen as well from various friends and family is often when there are elderly relatives that need care, not always, but sometimes it seemed to be that the burden of that sometimes can predominantly fall within the female siblings or the female in the household as well, and the toll that that takes too.
I think there's just a lot of pressure on everyone, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's too much. So I think we often say stuff to ourselves that we wouldn't dream of saying to our best friend or to our sister or to our family members. So, you know, why do we say that to ourselves? Why do we say the things that we wouldn't say to others? So I'm going to ask you both. I'm going to come to you, Jill, first. Your postcard's your future self. What are you going to remind yourself about your strength and your commitment?
Oh, this is a tricky one. It's taken me an awful long time to get to a place where I own the fact that I'm a good mum, because of coming through mental health and thinking I might leave my daughter. At the time I only had one. I blamed myself a lot, and I had a lot of guilt and shame around that. So it's taken a long time. So I think I would remind myself that I've come through the toughest of times. I nearly died, I nearly took my own life, and I fought and I rebuilt the attachment and bond with my daughter, and I have a beautiful relationship with her, as much as you can with a teenager, I think. And she's got her little sister. I would remind myself that the strength that's come from getting through those things and then going on to found a charity so that nobody else ever has to feel so alone with that journey in motherhood. Well, as much as possible, as many people as we can reach. That strength will get me through pretty much anything. I don't think there's many things that I can't do if I put my mind to them now. So I'd just remind myself of that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've been on quite a journey, and we're so glad that you're still here with us and able to share your story. Justine.
I think I'm going to have to think of something different from Monday. So I think probably what I'm going to go for this time is thinking about me, and one of the things that I think probably brings my mental health down is this idea of imposter syndrome. So it doesn't matter how well I'll perform at something, how good someone tells me, you know, the positive feedback I'll get from doing something, I'll always find about 10 negative things or 10 things that I could have done better. So it's actually telling myself, one, to believe myself, two, that I am enough, and actually that I can perform well. And I think, yes, that's not the case for every female, but I think there's maybe a lot of my female friends do struggle with this idea of imposter syndrome, or this idea of what they sometimes call socially prescribed perfectionism. I read that in a book, I can't take credit for that, but it's this idea of it doesn't matter what someone actually thinks of you, it's your perception of what they think. So actually reminding myself, if I've convinced myself that someone thinks I've done a terrible job, when actually, is that the case, or do I just think that in my head? So I think reminding myself of all these things is what would go in my postcard to my future self.
Perfect. I think mine is going to be that, you know, you can go through really tough and really dark times, but you can come out stronger, and you can turn, you know, those dark times to a positive. I lost my uncle to suicide in 2006, and I think for me that has always been the fight for where the line of work that I'm in now. It took me a long time to get there, but I've always gone by, I couldn't save David, but you know what, if I can save other people, then I will do my damnedest to do that. So in August it was 2 years since we started the Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide peer support group in Aberdeen, and as much as I hate that we need that group, we shouldn't need it, I'm so proud that we do have that little wee group in Aberdeen, and that we've been able to support people through our own grief. So I think it is just that reminder that you can hit rock bottom and go through some really dark times, but actually something positive can come out of it. And I wouldn't be in the line of work I am now and have met so many wonderful people throughout that journey if it hadn't been for losing him. So that's our little wee postcards. So what can we do? There's little things that we can each do each day. So give me one, Justine.
I'm going to go for this idea. Obviously, when we do our introduction to suicide prevention training, we always talk about spotting warning signs, but I'm going to go for something a bit less obvious and say, actually, what about that friend that you've got that always supports everyone else? that's always really busy, that looks like she's got a handle on things. Actually, perhaps she's the one that you need to be checking in on to check how they're okay. So I think checking in on everybody, not just the ones that you're maybe obviously worried about. Yeah.
Jill?
I don't know. I think it is about the modelling. So giving people an honest answer to how you doing, so that they feel safe to give you an honest answer. And I think there is also a big thing to be done with reassuring people that they're not a bother. Because I think that's very much in our culture here in the northeast of Scotland. We do not want to be a bother. We don't want to put our stuff on anybody else. We're fine.
Yeah, our emails of, I'm really sorry to bother you, but do you mind doing this?
It's literally their job. It's very easy to fall into those platitudes, and if you model being honest, well, I've had an okay day, feeling a bit anxious today, that might leave room for them to say, oh, my anxiety's been terrible, or whatever is going on. And I think it is kind of important. I don't know, there's always this through line from depression to suicide, but other mental health conditions can really impact somebody's thoughts about suicide. Like anxiety is a really, really bad one. So being aware that it's not always Eeyore, it's sometimes Tigger.
Yeah, definitely. I think listening is so important, and really being present. You know, if somebody's speaking to you, put away your phone, pay attention to them. Your body language is so important, and we're all so busy, but you just don't know when that person actually might just need you, and if they are a way to tell you something about their mental health or how they're feeling, they're not going to tell you if you're sat with your phone in your hand and you're. So please, when people are trying to speak to you, just give them it. You can't, people's time's precious, and we can't take that back. We've spoke a lot, Justine, about language, how important language is. The app, there's a fantastic app if you want to let people know about.
Yes, absolutely. So we're lucky in the Northeast that we have a bespoke app called Prevent Suicide Northeast. And within that, we have support services grouped by topic. There are tips on how to help somebody. So it's a really handy tool to have on your phone. So you've effectively got this in your back pocket anytime you need that. Be that in the workplace, be that within family. You're walking down the street and you see someone that you're a bit concerned about, but maybe you're not sure how to start that conversation. All those tips are within there. And more importantly, it also has something called a safety plan as well. So for anybody that's not come across that before, this is a really, really useful tool for anyone that's in crisis. So you can take them through what are their triggers, what sort of things they do to make themselves feel better, who are the trusted people in their lives that they would speak to, reasons to live. All of those things can sit within the app, and I would actually argue that it's something that we should all have, a bit like having an insurance policy, because you never know when you might need it.
Perfect. Myth busting. Should we talk a little bit about those myths? So the first one, you can't ask somebody if they're suicidal.
That's not true.
Absolutely not true.
So what are your facts? What are we?
We would say that that's a myth that's absolutely been debunked. So the only way, if you're worried about somebody, the only way you're going to know if they're thinking about suicide is to ask them and be clear and direct. So ask, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about ending your life? You absolutely cannot put a thought in someone's head. And actually, by creating this positive environment and having those conversations, you're actually helping to reduce risk.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, you're never going to plant the idea in somebody's head. Nobody is going to, well, it wasn't, but that sounds like a great plan. It's just not true. And making things sound soft and fluffy might feel easier to you. Using language in a way that's not direct, you can miss things so easily. So just ask the question. And I have done quite a wee bit of training, and I went on the assist course, and I quite often refer to my little guide, because it makes me think, oh yeah, don't don't be daft, Jill. You're going to ask the question, and I ask the question, and I go through my steps. And doing a bit of training like that really, really helps. So take those opportunities when they come up, because everybody is dealing with people every day. You might meet somebody who needs you to ask the question, and that doesn't mean you're now responsible for them for the rest of their life. It means that you've asked the question and you've helped them to engage with some support and potentially saved a life. And wow, that's an amazing thing you've done. So definitely ask the question, be direct. You cannot plant the idea.
So the next one, you can only call Samaritans if you're suicidal.
Absolutely not the case. So they exist for anybody who is in emotional distress or despair. So that could be anything from something that you've been struggling with for a long time to, you've had a bad day at work, you've had a tough conversation with a family member or a friend, or you need to debrief, feeling isolated and alone, and there's thoughts going around your head that you need to talk about. And that can include people that are struggling with thoughts of suicide. But absolutely, we don't have to wait for things to be at that point to reach out for support, be it Samaritans, be it Breathing Space, whichever support service that you choose to use. But absolutely, seeking help at the earliest opportunity is always best if you can.
There's a lovely support service called APNI, APNI, which is the Association of Postnatal Illness, that have a phone line for mums specifically. They support dads as well. Samaritans are amazing on a whole range of topics. Breathing Space, shout if you need to text, because you can't say those words. Text, shout, because I think between the new Mind helpline, Breathing Space, Samaritans, there's like 24-hour cover. You can get somebody.
There's always going to be somebody there
to feel alone.
Listen.
Yeah, you can let it out. And a lot of the time these thoughts are really, really scary when they're inside you and inside your head, and they don't like sunshine. They don't like other people looking at them and saying, that is a scary thought, and it's a big thing. How do you feel now that you've spoken to me about it? It can quash them, it can squash them, they fizzle away in the sunlight of somebody else's gaze. It can really help getting it out.
Yeah. So the next one, people who are suicidal want to die.
Again, that's another myth. It can be a case that having thoughts of suicide, or even having made a plan to end your life, doesn't necessarily mean that someone wants to be dead forever. It can be a case that it's actually the emotional pain that someone is in, they want that to stop, and they're in so much emotional pain. If you can almost imagine it like being in a tunnel, and as you go along it's getting narrower, it's difficult to see other choices between living and dying, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person actually wants to die.
Definitely. So I think there's so many myths we could probably speak all afternoon about kind of those, but it's important that we get these myths out, because that is part of the stigma, that is part of the problem as to why people don't speak out and people are scared. There's a lovely quote here from Rory O'Connor that says, evidence shows asking someone if they're suicidal can protect them. They feel listened to and hopefully less trapped. Their feelings are validated and they know that somebody cares about them. Reaching out can save a life, and it really can. Don't ever underestimate the power of a simple conversation. Smile at that person walking past the bus stop, ask if they're okay. There's a lot of people that are out there that are lonely and they're isolated, and you just have no idea what impact you could make on that person. So we need to be very careful with our words as well as good and bad in ones. So yeah, this has been Sarah. We've been with a Shmu in Focus podcast. We've been here with Justine from Sam H and Jill from Latnem, and we have been talking about Women's Mental Health and Suicide Awareness Week. So I think we've spent a lot of time about talking about kind of how we can support each other, how we can, check in on one another, listening. If somebody was to ask you guys, if they were feeling suicidal, we don't need to be professional to fix them. You know, we don't need to have all the answers. So what would you say if people are struggling and maybe worried about asking somebody? They don't need to know all the answers. They don't need to be a medical professional. They don't need to. So what would your tips be for somebody?
I think it sounds really simple to say, but it's listening with kindness and compassion. So again, as you said, Sarah, sometimes the reason why someone can shy away from being so clear and direct about asking about suicide is in their head they think, once I've asked that question, that's opening that can of worms and I suddenly have to fix it all. But, you know, depending on what's going on for that person, it might be a heavy burden of thoughts of suicide that they've been carrying around for a long time. Maybe it's thoughts that come and go. Maybe there is multiple things going on at once. You know, there's problems at home, there's problems at work, problems with the family, and it's absolutely not, you know, you as a person who happens to have been worried about somebody and asked the question, we're not asking you to fix all of that. And I remember a long time ago when I started my emotional support volunteering, someone said to me, you're going to sit and you're going to listen to people's problems, but you're not going to give them advice and you're not going to tell them what to do. And I can remember at that time thinking that sounded like such an alien concept. How could you possibly do that? But I think it's actually, you learn that it's giving the person the space and the time, and just, you know, once you've established how they're feeling, using a combination of silence, open questions, summarising, reflecting, to help them make sense of the jumbled thoughts in their head and see that there are wider options, and often will come to their own conclusions as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to give people space to be able to express what's going on for them. There's a lovely image of somebody speaking and inside their brain's all jumbled and it's spooling nicely into the other person's brain, because getting it out and into a kind ear is so helpful, and making sure that you know that you are there to listen. And it doesn't mean that you are now responsible for that person until the end of their life. It's not like in some movie they now owe you a life debt. You know, it's not that. It's, I'm going to give you space to talk this through. And 9 times out of 10, people will say, I feel really a lot better for getting it out. I'm going to phone the doctor. Or I feel a lot better for getting it out. I'm going to phone my CPN. Or whatever support network it is. You can encourage them to connect with. You can ask them to look at, you know, your app and maybe develop a safety plan. You can do all those lovely things with them, but the most important bit is the listening and the kindness, because it's not complicated.
Yeah.
A lot of...
It's something that we can all do. Suicide prevention is everybody's business. We all play a part, you know, whether you work in the corner shop down the road, whether you're a commuter standing at the bus stop going to work, whether you work in suicide prevention, you work in mental health, you work in a hospital, we all have an active role to play in society. And I think we can only create a world free from less suicides. I don't think we'll ever get to a stage where there won't be any suicides, but to be able to see the numbers going down would be a place that I'd like to see. So I think this has been really nice to speak to you guys and to have you on our Shmu in Focus podcast. I think we can all take away little actions today. You know, there's little things that we can all do. If you're listening, you know, check on those around you. Share your story. Lived experience is so important. You know, people often feel so isolated and so alone. Share your story. Tell people, do you know what, actually I'm struggling, because that can mean the world to somebody else to know that actually they're not alone, and that isn't you know, abnormal for them to be feeling that way. And yeah, the big ones to listen with kindness and compassion, and you know, just to be there to support somebody, and support local groups. You know, share them on Facebook, share little wee Sam H kind of messages and things that are going out. And yeah, I think we'll close with another Professor Rory O'Connor quote. I really like this one actually. So it says, never underestimate the power of human connection. I like that. And then the one from the suicide prevention page, was it, Justine? So we can create a more supportive and compassionate society where suicide is preventable and everyone feels valued and understood. Start the conversation today. Every conversation, no matter how small, contributes to a more supportive and understanding society. Together, we can make a difference and work towards a future where suicide prevention is prioritised and everyone feels supported to get the help that works for them. It's been lovely to have you guys on. Thank you for joining me. I have been Sarah and I've been your host for Shmu in Focus, and we will see you next time.